So what if I told you there's a way to shift our obsession? The type of obsession that kind of affects our well-being, affects our day-to-day life, affects our ability to focus and concentrate. What if there was a way to shift that logically through a different understanding that could actually help you obsess in maybe a little bit of a different form so that you wouldn't be um, stuck. Let's just say it that way. So that's what we're going to talk about today on this channel. We use logic in a practical way to shift our frequency or our emotions. And so let's get to it. So welcome back to Zen Penguin. And today we're going to talk about obsessive thinking. Obsessive thinking is, in my opinion, the biggest karma. Karma is about looping things and expecting different results. And we tend to do that obsessive thinking because we're looping a control mechanism for something that we are missing inside of ourselves. So when I talk about control, it's like a power element. It's like we lose power in ourselves and then we think about it, because let's just take it from the consciousness scale. So if we're at our inherent nature of love and we lose power, we're dropping down the consciousness scale, let's just say to a rejection, something of that nature. Because that's the best one for me when I talk about relationships where we obsess, is because that is the biggest power loss that we tend to experience aside from money. So all Venus type themes, right? And so if we're losing power, what we do is we go into that fight or flight type energy, which is, to control or to re-regulate ourselves so we don't feel terrible. We have a pattern that we do. And that's where obsession comes from, because the mind gets over triggered and then stimulated into overthinking. And the thinking is to help us build a case or figure out how to feel better, period. Why is my power lost? How do I think my way into getting it back? And so how that translates is, how this guy rejected me, how do I get him back so I feel better? Or I lost my job and now I'm pissed off at my boss, and you start building a case and obsessing about your boss or whatever that is to make you feel better, to feel like you're not losing control and power. And so I want to use that to understand and springboard into how we can obsess a little differently to get our power back, because the power back is what's going to make us feel better. Okay, so let's go into logic that's outside of our current dimensions of thinking, because that's what's going to help you break the loop. Because the loop is you're doing the same thinking for control and getting your power back that you've always done, expecting a different result, as I said. And so this channel, what we try to do is look at paradigms outside of our current understanding so we can expand out of that and then learn to shift our focus from what we usually do, which is that obsession over and over again, the same way we've always thought, and move it into a new direction so we can use our mind, even to an obsessive extent, to transform. Okay. And so how I would like to look at this is through astrology. And so astrology is in the wheel, they have 12 houses, and every opposition is a duality. Okay. And so let's just say, for, sake of this video, we have Pluto in the first house. And so what that means is the first house is about who you are, right? And then opposing Pluto over here, you have Chiron in the seventh house, which is you're wounded by relationships. And let's just say that that seventh house is in the sign of Aries. Okay. So if you understand this, you are over here with Pluto, and you have Pluto as your power, right? And then in the seventh house, you have a detriment. There's something going wrong. And then Aries doesn't like to be in the seventh house because that's the house ruled by Venus, masculine, feminine, right? And so it's in the opposite polarity. So what's happening here, just so we can understand logically, is that your detriment is Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is a very strong masculine energy. Okay. And so with Pluto over here opposing that, Pluto is looking to get your power back. Evolutionary astrology talks about this a lot because they believe that Pluto is the main character in your play. So, and I truly do kind of believe that, and you'll kind of understand that if we're losing power and Pluto is opposing where we're losing power. So what happens is that you're losing power in that Mars house, which is relationships. So what's happening is that you will meet people who possess a lot of that Mars energy, because it is where you lose you don't have your own. You don't have a strong Mars energy. You have Chiron there, you have, just detriment, right? Even just Aries being in your 7th house would be detriment. But you don't have to understand your chart. I'm just using this logic to help you understand the power loss and how to get it back. So what would happen in that scenario is you would start attracting people that have a lot of Mars energy in their chart, in their energy body. You're missing it, you would attract what you're missing, because the universe is all about balance. So you're out of balance there. And that's where out of balance is losing your power. And so it would help you to understand that sometimes we attract situations and we're just like obsessing over it, and we're like, what the heck? Like, you can meet a guy for a week and then they just go away and it affects you long term. Why? Because they possess a lot of that energy that you're missing or you've rejected and put into your shadow, so it's not part of your power, and your soul is trying to get your power back. And so when you attracted that person, you felt the power of it, but guess what you're doing? You're using something external to fill an internal loss of power. So you're attracting what you have in detriment inside you. And this is what we do. We chase the things that we don't have within ourselves. So energetically speaking, you're chasing Mars in that person. They possess a lot of Mars energy and you don't. And this is a great example because Mars is about our willpower and our will to go on, and our warrior-like sense that we do need, our ego. We need all of that to survive, and the ego wants to feel safe and in control, so this would be really hard. But the problem with that is that this person that possesses a lot of Mars, and most likely if you're in detriment with Mars, and we're just going to help understand this. You don't have to understand your chart to understand what I'm saying. Is that person is going to be quite opposite of you, because if that first house is Libra and the 7th house is Mars, Venus energy is more like what we would call that empath. I care about people's feelings. I try not to, trigger them too much. And if I feel like they're triggered, I'm empathetic to their situation. I put myself in their shoes. Well, Aries energy is not like that at all. Aries energy is like, screw you, I'm gonna do me. They're just very animalistic in that way. And so when we attract that person, they are going to disregard our feelings, and that's going to get us obsessing. But that's because we have to learn, if we have way too much Venus energy, we have to learn to balance that. We can't be people pleasers. It's a very detriment of Libra. And so what we're doing then is we're getting triggered by somebody with a lot of Mars energy, and they're out of balance probably with their energy, because we're always matched up with our perfect imbalances. And so we will look to change them. Yeah. And then what happens is that triggers them even more, because anytime you guilt and shame somebody, you polarize them away from you. And so they won't come back, and then you obsess. And this is the part of obsession. I hope you're with me here. So you're finding the energy that you lack in yourself. And how you can understand that practically is they're doing things you're not capable of doing, and then you're judging it. Because you're like, I can't just walk away and be like, screw you. Well, yes, you can. It's being selfish. There is a level of selfishness that you have to possess in this world. Otherwise, you become a super people pleaser and you get nowhere. All the loss of power, right? And so it's to balance that out. But then with the Aries person, they need to learn to at least explain themselves, not just like screw you and walk away. Like, there's a balance there, right? But either way, you just can understand the reason that you're obsessing is you're using all of, when you're loss of power, you're using all of the mental patterns that you've used to feel more regulated when that happens. And in most cases, in this scenario, it would be, I need to tell this fool about themselves. Right? But that's actually the opposite. We don't want to do anything external to feel better. We don't want to allow external things to dictate how we feel, but that happens when we have an energy in us that's in detriment or in shadow, or we don't like that. So in this case, that person wouldn't like to be assertive and selfish. They wouldn't like it at all. But there's points, if you're a Libra, you would understand. So how do we use our mind then to start turning it back into us to get back our Aries energy without seeking it from that person? Because that's the cure to the obsession. So what we would do is obsess on figuring out, why can't I be more Mars like? Because when you start to cultivate that Mars energy in you, that person going away, you won't want to grab on and say, no, I need your energy to feel whole. You would have cultivated it in yourself. And this pulling away of energy or loss of power is the main culprit of obsession. So, and we do this in all kinds of dynamics, all like bosses, kids, anybody that we feel that trigger and that loss of our regulated whole self. So let's get to the tips on how we can start to cultivate it in ourselves and give some examples. So the number one way to start to cultivate that feeling is to recognize that that's what you're chasing. And how do we do that? There's a lot of logical things that people say, like the mirror principle or what you judge, things like that, but that's real right there. So we're going to go with what we judge. And so we're going to keep on with this scenario because this is very true to my life. So the scenario where I'm judging that person for being a dick. Like, what a dick. They didn't even respond. Like, what the heck, right? And so then I could go deeper and say, why didn't they respond? And you have to get real with yourself so you can understand. Instead of judging that they're just a dick, you have to understand, why would they not respond? And the true answer is because they don't care. They don't give a shit. They're just over there living their lives. Oh, she texts, whatever. And we all do that. And so if your Mars energy is in detriment, you don't like that about yourself. For real. Because you want to be more of that Libra energy where you're people pleasing and you're a good person, right? And this person's bad because they're being selfish. So you don't like to be selfish. That's why it's in detriment. That's why it's a shadow. And that's why you got to pull that up and start embracing some of those qualities with deep acceptance instead of rejection. Because they're rejecting you as a mirror to what you're doing to yourself. You're rejecting the Mars qualities in yourself. You don't like that. And remember, there's a balance to all these houses. They're all polar opposites, and we're supposed to get to the center, which is wholeness of all 12 houses, which is bananas, but not as hard as you think. So why don't you like that about yourself? Well, most of the time it's because at some point in your reality or even other lifetimes, you got into the habit of, if you were selfish, people didn't like it. And you know what? People always move the goalposts. Nobody likes anything. They're always going to find something to not like. So however you can use your mind to start accepting that I have to be more selfish is going to, ironically, erase the obsession. So we want to obsess more on ourselves and why we can't be more like that person. So what we judge is the indicator of what we don't like about ourselves. And then when we start accepting that part, we are cultivating that energy, and then we won't need the external to come and fill that. I hope that makes sense. So let's go into another example. So we're going to use the next example of Cancer and Capricorn, also dualistic signs, but part of the cardinal cross. So Aries, Libra. Aries is the start of spring. It births things. This is what makes it a cardinal sign. Libra is the fall. It causes the death of things. And then Cancer is summer, where everything's just emotionally wonderful. And then Capricorn is winter, where everything is not emotionally beautiful. And so the rulers is Cancer is the moon, and then Capricorn is Saturn, which is known to be a hard ass. So if you have Capricorn in detriment and you're a Cancer, Cancers are loving and kind when they're not triggered, and they believe that the heart should be the leader. And, if you have too much Capricorn, you could not have any practical application to your awakening. It's just all sunshine and rainbows and everything will work out. We don't have to build a foundation in the 3D. We don't have to ground into 3D. We don't have to build anything. Everything's just going to happen like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And so with these two, if you have Capricorn in detriment, what would happen is you, as a Cancer dominant person, would attract people with a lot of Capricorn Saturn energy. And so if in the difference of those two things is, let's just say you were at school and you were full of Cancer and your Capricorn in detriment, your teacher would be a lot of Capricorn energy, and you'd be like, I'm sorry, teacher. And that usually works for you, right? Tenderness, caring, mothering, maternal, that's Cancer energy. And so usually when you say that to somebody, they'd be like, it's okay, honey. Don't worry about it. I know you'll catch up. But a Saturnian person would just smack the shit out of your hand with the ruler and be like, get it together. And so you would go home as that Cancer person that doesn't like Capricorn qualities, and you would ruminate and obsess. Why don't they like me? Why this and that? It has nothing to do with any of that. All of the mental looping that you will do to figure it out, obsess about, has absolutely nothing to do with it. So we can use the example I used before. Where in myself have I repressed that I can be hard? Because remember, it's a balance. And, Capricorn people are heavily needed because we are, to me, Saturn rules the 3D. And so we need to have the construction of the matrix in the way that we want it. And the Cancer energy is the deepest energetics. And then the Capricorn energy is we're going to build from there. So remember I said, you don't build a foundation if you're too Cancer. So where are you not building from emotional intelligence? Where are you not grounding it in and being practical? Because in the same scenario that I was talking about before with Libra and people pleasing, Cancerians can be that way as well. Both of those are very feminine energies, and Mars and Saturn are very masculine energies. So again, the detriment of masculine energy. And so what you would want to do and start to look at, where can I not be a little rigid and hard? Like, no, you can't just get me to say it's okay. No, it's not okay. If we want to build this, we got to be a little more rigid. And you don't like that about yourself. And for me, how that would display is I don't like to be bossy, and see how Libra and the feminine aspects of Libra and Cancer can be very similar, because it's like we want to just be in our feminine. And, we need to balance that with the masculine thing of building. And so we might have to have hard edges. We might have to be a little hard. We might have to, because what is winter? Saturn rules winter. Winter is, we had made preparations to get through this, right? And if you're just all sunshines and rainbows, you made no preparations, you're going to freeze in the cold. So we look for that externally. If we have that teacher that's hard and it's triggering us and obsessing about why they don't like us. Cancers think that all the time. Why don't they like me? So do Libras. And it's really not about that. It's that they're being Sagittarian, and you are only triggered because you don't possess that. So start looking at, where am I letting people slide on structure? Where am I not structuring myself consistently? And this isn't to beat yourself up. This is about accepting that part so you can start cultivating that energy. And again, so you're not rejecting that energy. Because if you recognize that in yourself and you go into self-sabotage of, I'm so terrible, I can't structure nothing, I'm too Cancer and not enough Capricorn. It's not it. That's how it gets repressed in the first place. And that's why you seek it outside yourself. You want to accept yourself just how you are. So trust me, you're doing Capricorn things, but you don't like it. And it's very wonky and out of balance. You could be all the way Cancer one day and all the way Capricorn the next. But this is the key to not obsess, because obsessing is part of the mind, which is part of the body, which is part of the ego. And the ego just wants to feel safe and in control based on patterns that we probably started thinking when we were very young that wouldn't even make sense to our wise mind or our higher self. So if you start to recognize what that person is showing you, and you start to recognize where you don't like that about yourself, lo and behold, you're cured. You're whole. Obsession only comes from lack. And then when you become whole, you start to become powerful. You get all your power back. And so once you have all your power back, you won't need to seek something external to feel powerful, or also known as to feel whole, to feel in the states of joy, peace, love. The obsession is coming because you fell from that. You fell from grace, right? Grace is up there too. And so I like when, I always like to put like what I learn about things into biblical sense with what Jesus said. And so he's walking, he's doing his ministry, he's whole, he's one with God, which is love. And he's just like, yay, I and my Father are one. And he's walking down the street, and all of a sudden somebody touches his robe, and he's like, what? Who touched me? You know, people don't talk about this verse a lot, but I'm telling you, who touched me? Because somebody drew his power. So he was focusing on, what is this feminine aspect, because as a woman, that I'm still missing in me. And he sought her out to figure that out, and had a conversation with her so that he could do the inner work that we're talking about right now, in my opinion. So I hope this expanded your logic to other ways to obsess. Obsess about where inside yourself. Focus on the reality of where you're doing the things that you don't like that people are doing to you, and accept that deeply. Then you'll be whole, and you won't give a shit what other people are doing. You won't be triggered. All right, so that's it for now. Still have that offer through the end of the month where you get buy one, get one free on a astrology and psychic report, helping you understand your patterns, especially how we talked about it today. You know, I can definitely help you understand where you're losing your power and how to gain that back. So that's what those reports are for. The link is in the description. And until next time, take care.